scientists that different species of creatures came into being over the course of hundreds of millions of years through the process of evolution.
You basically say in this museum that dinosaurs and human beings existed at the same time?
Oh, absolutely. Because, the Bible teaches that God made land animals on day 6 alongside Adam and Eve and dead.
Ham understands that Supreme Court decisions mandating separation between church and state mean his point of view cannot be taught in public schools. Still, he sees a glimmer on the horizon. A new theory called intelligent design is bringing hope to Christians like himself who don't believe in evolution.
They see it as a way of maybe this is how we can try to get school students to at least hear of another view.
The underlying premise of intelligent design is that recent advances in molecular biology have allowed scientists for the first time to peer into the inner workings of a single cell, revealing mechanisms so complex that they couldn't possibly have evolved by chance and must have been deliberately designed. Especially when it comes to DNA, the building block of life. This video was created by the Seattle-based Discovery Institute, cradle of the intelligent design theory.
There is, in fact, no entity in the known universe that stores and processes more information more efficiently than the DNA molecule.
In other words, we're seeing something that in any other realm of experience would trigger an awareness of design, and therefore we think the best inference is that things were actually designed.
Stephen Meyer, who holds a doctorate in the history of science, is director of the Discovery Institute's Center for Science and Culture. He says that ID is based entirely on observable scientific evidence, and that it's not creationist theory. But he acknowledges
it's consistent with a view that many people in our culture hold, that there is some larger purpose derived from a creator.
And would that be a Christian creator?
Well, many people have different interpretations of that.
Nobody buys for a moment that they have in mind the creature from the Black Lagoon or any other possible intelligent designer. Clearly they're referring to God.
Niles Eldridge is a paleontologist at the American Museum of Natural History in New York and curator of an upcoming exhibit on naturalist Charles Darwin, whose studies in the Galapagos Islands led to his landmark publication On the Origin of Species in 1859, which inspired
monumental sea change in our thinking about who we are and how we came to be.
Darwin theorized that all living things evolved from the same simple organisms. Over countless generations, random mutations or changes have occurred, with the strongest specimens surviving and reproducing, a process known as natural selection. That process eventually led to the formation of new species and higher forms of life, including humans.
Greatest headlines of the century.
Darwin's theory met resistance from the start in this country. Back in 1925, Tennessee high school science teacher John Scopes was put on trial and banned from teaching evolution. Today, of course, religion has been banished from the science class. But now there's a court case going on over teaching intelligent design in Dover, Pennsylvania, where the school board says it should be allowed. Just to show how complicated this issue is, the folks at the Discovery Institute, the major proponents of intelligent design, do not support the school board because of reports that
they justified the policy using an explicit statement of religious purpose, which is not only unconstitutional, it's incongruous with what we're trying to do, which is to make a scientific case for the idea of intelligent design.
In fact, although Meyer and his colleagues argue that the theory of intelligent design is purely scientific, they also say it's too new to be a requirement in public school science classes. But they are demanding something else.
We think that students should be informed about the growing scientific criticism of Darwinian evolution.
a small number of scientists now challenge some of the fundamental tenets of Darwinism. They point, for example, to tiny bacteria with moving tails known as flagella, and insist that their intricate workings could not be the result of a genetic accident.
Well, maybe that's what they believe. But for biologists, we know differently.
Biochemist Maxine Singer says there are clear evolutionary explanations for this and other issues raised by ID theory. A member of the National Academies of Science and former head of the Carnegie Institution in Washington, she says that intelligent design is not science. It's a leap of faith.
The whole concept of science is you're always asking new questions. But intelligent design says this is the end of questions, because here's the explanation. Some intelligent designer said that this is the way it's going to be. And so for kids in school, it closes their minds, not opens them.
So how does that affect the Spanish changes?
But what about the argument that students should at least be taught that there's a controversy over Darwin's theory?
There are controversies about the mechanisms of evolution, and we should be teaching those. But there is no controversy in science about whether evolution occurs or not.
Nevertheless, evolution, the idea that we are all descended from apes, has never been popular in the U.S.
A new CBS News poll finds that 51% of Americans believe that God created human beings in their present form. 3 states have now adopted policies that require teachers to introduce scientific criticisms of the Darwinian theory of evolution. So it's no surprise that intelligent design is capturing public attention. President Bush made news when he said ID should be taught.
Well, I think it'll be fairly difficult to teach geology, anthropology, and zoology without...
And just a week ago on the program West Wing, a fictional presidential candidate was asked,
do you believe that the theory of intelligent design and the theory of evolution should be taught alongside each other in the public schools?
Absolutely not. One is based on science, one is based on faith.
That fictional character is not the only one who thinks so. John Haught is a research professor of theology at Georgetown University and author of several books on religion and evolution. He argues that science is just not equipped to deal with spiritual or philosophical questions.
There's a point in our quest for understanding, it seems to me, where the question of what the ultimate explanation of things is quite legitimate and needs to be asked. But science does not ask ultimate questions. It asks questions about proximate physical causes. So by definition, science simply is not wired to pick up any signals of some ultimate intelligence or ultimate wisdom.
But at the Creation Museum in Kentucky, Ken Ham believes that the theory of intelligent design is going to reopen debate in this country about religion in the science classroom.
At least they're starting to get people to think about the issue. They're battling it in public, and I believe you're going to see a lot more. You're seeing that culture war in America, and you're going to see that culture war heat up.
Meaning the answers to age-old questions like who we are and why we're here may remain as elusive as ever.
One point was that you feel that the thesis of intelligent design will support the whole concept of white supremacy. Exactly. For those who might not be aware of how that hooks up, if you propose what is generally understood to be intelligent design, and I say what is generally understood to be because the young man from the Institute kind of separates himself from the creation theory people. But what creationist theory says, basically, goes back to Bishop Ussher when he proposed that life has been on the planet, human life has been on the planet for 6,000 years. If you propose that, and of course that's also what was being proposed by the gentleman who had the museum. If you say that life has only been on the planet for 6,000 years, then dinosaurs and humans have to have been here in the same time frame. because everything has happened in 6,000 years. That also presupposes no time for the development of language. And you've heard them say that 51% of Americans believe that God created humans in their present form. That means already speaking the various languages that they speak. No time for the development of language. It also presupposes no time for the development of movement around the planet. So not only did God create everybody speaking the languages that they now speak and having the culture they now have, but God also created people in the places you now find them, because there's no time for them to migrate. That means the Chinese were made by God in China. The South Americans were made by God in South America. The Europeans were made by God in Europe. And the Africans are made by God in Africa. And if you do that, then you also can propose that God, in making those various people, may have given them different attributes the way he created them. If you propose what Darwin said happened, that life has been on the planet in some form, human life, for some 4 to 5 million years, coming all from the same basic stock, then you really have no justification of saying that one group may be smarter than the other. So that behind some of the creationist thesis, now being called intelligent design, there is white supremacy. That's one point. The other point the brother made was that when you tell people that things are this way because God made them this way, that does not encourage you to find out how did God do it. In fact, it would almost be none of your business how God did it. So the whole evolution creationist thesis argument also, when you come down on the creationist side, has the tendency to shut down investigation. That's what brother heard. What else does somebody else hear?
Well,
yes, sister. I'm sorry, microphone. I see it coming, okay. There it is. Sister Mona.
Good morning. Just from the comment that you made, Brother Assegai, if we learned in our last class that we have a culture and we've been around for like 10,000 years, then the creationism has closed the door short on the civilizations that developed over this period of time. It also closes the door on migration patterns, trade, and the use of the natural resources around the continent before they shifted. So if you look at it that way, then they're telling us that we don't have a heritage or a culture that we can draw from, and that our value system stops short of where they're saying that we've been created. I guess my issue is that I thought that we were created from God. And so as I'm learning the different value systems in our culture, I see that there's a lot of different arguments or positions that are being offered to say, you know, this man is greater than that man when we're all of the human race. So I'm still open and developing in that area, but I would like to think that, you know, if we were created, then it's not the way that the scientists or these researchers are saying, because no one really knows the mind of God, if there's a God.
I heard a joke one time about a teacher who was talking to her kindergarten class. This microphone, by the way, is a pickup for him. It's not broadcasting. It doesn't make things any louder, so you have to talk loud. And the kindergarten teacher asked her students to draw pictures. And she was moving around the class, looking at the various pictures they were drawing. And she came to Johnny and said, "Johnny, what are you drawing?" He says, I'm drawing God. She says, Johnny, nobody knows what God looks like. He said, tell him, wait a minute, they'll know in a few minutes. He said, wait a minute, they'll know in a few minutes when I finish drawing them. That's a very good point, because I'm going to talk today about mythology. All of us are victims of myths, mythology. I initially also was bothered by the whole thought that, you know, if evolution is correct, then maybe God did not design us. But then later on, I got to thinking about that, and it might not be the problem with evolution I was having. It might be the problem with my concept of what God is. Because in fact, when I grew up as a child, the first image of God I had, God was an old white man sitting on a throne somewhere up in heaven. An old, not young, white man, not black man, sitting on a throne, not sitting on the ground, somewhere up in heaven. Nowhere I can touch him. And that concept still permeates much of my thinking. Now, what I want to talk about today is mythology. I'm going to get to just a second. But I want to touch on a few more things that I saw in this story on CBS Sunday Morning. The gentleman who opened the museum, what were his credentials? Anybody? Did you hear any?
The Creation Museum?
Yes.
First, he was a PhD.
No, he was not.
He was a preacher.
He was a preacher. The guy who opened the museum was a preacher. Okay, that's one person we saw. Now, the young lady who spoke about the fact that biology, in fact, could prove various things and delineate certain things, what were her credentials?
Biologist.
She was a biologist and biochemist. So she was a scientist. The gentleman who was in charge of the Intelligent Design Institute, what were his credentials? He was a PhD in what?
Religion? No.
No, not religion.
Not biology. The other. DNA.
No. He was a PhD in the history of science. He was not a scientist. He was a PhD in the history of science. Okay, that's different. So the reason I want to show that, as you watch these various discussions, you've got to take note of who is being put forth and what their credentials are to really talk about what they're talking about. There was a PhD in religion toward the end. He's written books on what? The theology of evolution. So apparently he had no problem with evolution. His argument simply was that when you get into questions of theology, scientists are really not able to even discuss that.
Right.
That's something else.
He said it's outside the realm of science.
It's outside the realm of science. And I would agree with that. Theology is outside the realm of science. But he didn't necessarily have a problem himself with evolution. Now, they said, one other thing I thought was interesting. They said 51% of Americans believe that God created humans in their present form. I found it interesting because that's not the same proportion you find around the world. Americans are much more fundamentalist country when it comes to religion than most of the other countries in the world. Had they done this particular news report in Israel, what do you think the proportion would have been of those who said that God created humans in their present form? Give me a number.
21.
Less than 10, you say? The point I'm trying to make here is that all of modern Christian theology and much of modern Islamic theology is based upon Hebrew theology.